talking about my library system diagram. So let's start off with collection, as collection is the basis of everything, as a library is just a collection of things that are just library items. So there can be 0 to infinite collections per employee and 0 to infinite employees per collection. And this can be classified as not aggregation, association, because they're just related to each other. Now let's talk about collection and library items. A collection can contain 0 to infinite library items, and a library item can be classified under 0 to infinite collections. And this is a case of aggregation because the collection has a library item. Now we have the relationship between library item and address. This is just a composition relationship because the library item address will only exist when there is a library item. And it's a one-to-one multiplicity because there's one address per library item. Now let's look at the generalization relationship between media and library item, as media is just a subclass of library items. DVD, magazine, and book are all subclasses of media, and ebook is a subclass of a book. Now let's look at the relationship between library item and fees. And this is a composition relationship because there would be no fees if there was no library item. There can be 0 to infinite fees per library item, which is why there's this multiplicity. And same with the fees, the relationship between online payment and fees. It is also a composition relationship. There can be one payment per fee, which is why it's a one-to-one multiplicity. Now moving on to the relationship between library item and borrowed item. Library item is a generalization of a borrowed item, because a borrowed item is a superclass of a library item. A library item is just a type of borrowed item. There's a bunch of types of borrowed items, and a library item just comes across as one of them. And now moving on, we can have the relationship between borrowed item and date. There is one date per borrowed item, which is why there's a one-to-one multiplicity. And now for the last one, we have borrowed item and borrower. And a borrowed item requires a borrower to exist, which is why we have the composition relationship over here. And a borrower can borrow 0 to infinite borrowed items, but a borrowed item can only go to one borrower, which is why we have this multiplicity. And some possible attributes for borrower and borrowed item. For borrower, you can have name, age, gender, all the usual human things. And for borrowed item, you can have barcode, integer, title, string, and the cost of the borrowed item, which is integer. And that concludes my library system diagram explanation.